guns. They've stopped. Stabilize your rear
Alright, I made some
deflectors.
progress on the Y-wing. This is turning into more like a construction project than an actual model build, but that's what you get. So I had to hollow out the back of this main fuselage piece just to make sure I can get to all the wiring and I can get to where I'm going to put the post for the support for the model, which I haven't figured out yet. But I did get the wing nacelle supports figured out, and I used brass tubing to secure these pieces onto the body, so there's no way this thing's going to bend. There's actually two in here. One of them is a smaller one that went through the end of this piece, and the other one's here. This one's about quarter-inch. This one's a little smaller. And I ran the wire through this that goes into the body so I can power the lights for the engines, and that will meet up with the power coming from the front fuselage, and that should work out nice. There's a cover that goes on this so you won't see this hole, so I can make this hole as big as I want. And I thought, why not, let me cut out a big spot so I'm not trying to put tweezers in there or something like that where I'm you know, confined. I drilled holes in the body to support the wings, so these go in here, and this whole piece is going to slide into place real tight. So these things should not go anywhere. I'm not supporting 10 pounds, I'm only supporting the weight of the engine, which is, you know, maybe, I don't know, 6 ounces. So that should be fine. I shouldn't get any sag there or anything. So that's all figured out. I have not glued one piece on this model yet. I've just been hacking away at resin and getting holes drilled, and I should have the entire fuselage together soon. That way I can, all I have to do is attach the engines. So once I have the fuselage together, I can actually work on the detail parts that go on the side. And I think I have a lot of that figured out by looking at instructions online of another kit that was similar, but it's not the same kit, so there are some differences. But it gives me some good ideas of where these parts go, and all the other detailed parts, for the most part, I think I have figured out. I'm not sure exactly how the engines fit on. I don't know where they line up on this piece, and I'll have to look and see if I can figure it out from pictures, because I'm not exactly sure, and it's not prominent on this piece, and there's no diagram on this piece of where the support meets up. So I really have no idea. I'm going to have to look at pictures and try and figure it out. The engines, this piece goes in here, and obviously you have to hollow out this wall here on the engine body, and I thought that this piece was hollow and that there was just a wall there, but that's not the case. This whole piece is solid. So I have no idea why they made it solid, but I was able to drill through it using a 1/2-inch drill bit and a drill press. You definitely want to use a drill press for this because you want to go straight, but it's still not big enough, so I'm going to have to go in there with a Dremel. I have one of these bits on here that will eat away the resin pretty quickly, so it's just messy, so I'm going to have to make that hole bigger. And because I had to do that, I could not keep this detail. There's a piece in there that's some detail. I'm not even sure if that's on the filming model. It doesn't look like it even is. So it really doesn't matter if I lose it, but I kind of like it, so I thought maybe I want to put it back on when I drill through this. And as you can see, when I drilled through it, just ate away that piece. So when I'm finished making this hole bigger, I actually copied this piece so I can replace it. I can put this back on here when the hole is done, and it will be there when the light shines through, and kind of give some detail for the light to shine through, which is going to throw a pattern of lighting, which I think I'm going to want instead of having just the hole there. So I took this piece and I duplicated the part that was in here, because it was the same part that's on an X-Wing. It's just a shorter piece, so it's a heat sink that's on one of the guns on the X-Wing. So I was able to find that file and adjust it so it's thinner and the same width that it needs to be to go in there. So I have to print another one. I need two. So I got around that problem. So the next step for me to do is get the whole fuselage together, and then while I'm doing pipe work on this thing, I can work on the engines and get the engines together. The pipe work is not included with the model, and as far as I can tell, I think that's standard for these Y-Wing kits. So it's not just mine, it's all other kits that normally don't include that piping. Other kits do have a diagram that they give you that shows where all the piping goes, and they were nice enough to keep that on the line, so I was able to find it. So I can use the diagram that they provided to make my own piping, and it's actually just styrene plastic, which I think I have. They recommend using styrene or brass tubing if you have it. So I don't know. I'll probably use a combination of both, and when I start to actually do the pipe work. This pipe work is just brass tubing that I forgot to mention. If you have longer drill bits, it helps. These bits are about 12 inches long, and I use these to get through this wing piece because my standard size drill bit wouldn't make it. So instead of drilling in this way and then the other way or whatever, it pays to have a couple of these around. I'll show you what I did for the electronics or electrical work. So I needed something to support the ship really, really well, and I think this should do it. I had this section of metal pipe, and I had cut a hole to run the wires, and I have a microphone connector that I use, which is 8 pins. And I had fit this in here. It fits perfectly snug. And then I cut a hole in the bottom of this, which I still have to clean up. It's just a rough cut, but it's big enough right now. So this will go in. This metal pole goes in and sits against the top of the ship on the inside. So all I have to do is epoxy this in, and I don't know if you can see inside there, but it actually hits the roof of the ship, and I'm going to epoxy it on top and bottom, and then around here. I think it should prevent any movement, and it should work. I have to test the solder joints before I epoxy this in here. And I made up these little diagrams because I don't know about you, but I can't remember what I had for breakfast. So if I put this model aside for 2 weeks and then I come back and I forget which wires I used, I can refer to my handy chart that has the 8 pin is the ground and the 1 pin is the power. And when I use the diagram, I can reference it when I wire up the male side of the jack for the base for the post. Just a handy tip, learn from my mistakes. If you don't have one of these, I highly suggest you buy one. It is a digital caliper, and I use that for all of this hole drilling and stuff that I'd figured out. I don't like guess at this stuff. I mean, I like to know exactly what size this pipe is, what size hole I have to drill, how far I have to come in to center, all this other stuff. Anyway, I use these things all the time. I don't even put them in the case anymore because I was constantly taking them out of the case. So I just leave them around. I bought 2 of them, and I always have one within reach to measure anything I need to measure. And with models, once you start using one of these things, you'll never do without it. And rulers, forget it. It's just a waste of time. You can never fit them where you want to. And get some calipers. So I'm going to wire this thing up. I am going to test this connector to make sure it works before I epoxy anything, because I don't want to epoxy all this stuff in place and then I'll be in big trouble if this thing doesn't work. So I'm going to wire this up, and that will give me a chance to test out my connections, and then I can hook up the front fuselage, and I can test all that, and then I can mount this thing on a post, and I can work from there. So it gives me something to base this on, and I can go from there. And it's going to come in handy when I start doing the pipe work, because I can adjust it, and I can level it, and I can move it around. Okay, making more progress on the Y-wing. I have the front and neck sections together. I showed the post that I had put in there and the fiber optics and stuff, and I ran a power line for the R2 unit and a power line wire into the secondary fuselage area for the lighting for the main power and for the engines. So all my wiring is done for this section here. I have this sticking out here because I had changed up my plan for connecting the wing supports and the engine supports, and I didn't like the brass tube idea for. I didn't see the point in having a brass tube on this side and a brass tube on this side going into the engine support and into the engine, and one on this side. So I got a threaded tube, or a threaded rod, which is about a 1/4 inch, and this goes through both sides and will go through the engine support and into the engine. And I'm working on building a support that will slide inside the engine, so this threaded rod will come into the support, and I could put a nut on here and tighten it down. So basically I'm pulling both of these sections together, and I'm still using the brass pipe to run the wiring through the engine support and into the engine. So I have pins installed to connect the neck to the rear fuselage. Let me take this out before I impale myself, which I almost did already once tonight. So I put in 3 pins. They're all solid. So there's a solid 1/4 inch metal and 2 brass pins, and I had the holes drilled into the neck piece, and this piece just kind of works its way on here nice and tight. And those pins are actually in there with epoxy, and I will epoxy this whole piece on here in the pinholes as well to get a really tight fit. There's a little bit of a gap in there, but that's okay, I'll fix that. It's just the way that the part was molded. It's kind of off a little bit, so I can fix that. But this is, you could probably swing this thing around and it's not coming apart. So I'll come back when I have more done. Thanks.
Gold 5 to Red Leader.
Lost Tyree, lost touch.
I copy, Gold Leader.
It came from behind.